Hello, Brian King, the Mindset King here. One thing we see constantly on the news or on social media is the reports on violence. Violence in the streets, violence in the cities, violence in the schools. And so when people talk about how do we end this violence? We got to control guns, which I personally believe in, sensible gun control. We need to raise our kids better. We need to control the video games our kids have access to. All of these external controls that we seek in order to end violence. But one thing that is rarely given attention to is the violence in our own minds. And I see this with my children, I see it with myself, with my friends. Everybody that's a human being engages in a degree of violence within their own mind. And when I say violence, what I'm referring to is that conceiving of the delivery of harm as a remedy. One thing you see in this rising tendency to be offended about things is there tends to be a degree of wishing harm upon the person that offended you. You should be punished. You should be reprimanded. You should be ashamed of yourself for offending me. I'm wishing you to self-inflict some harm upon yourself. You should feel ashamed. That's a projection of violence from your mind. Somebody who says, man, I'm so worthless. I'm unlovable. If I just died tomorrow, nobody would miss me. I really deserve to be punished for what I did. That is directing violence towards yourself. That wish for harm. And when you think about all of the violent acts that are perpetrated in the world, where did it begin? It didn't begin from that place of peacefulness, of centeredness, of connection. It began from that place of violence in the mind. Believing that you are separate from other people that are against you, that are cruel to you, that deserve to be punished by you or by some other entity. And where does that get us? That belief that delivery of harm is somehow an acceptable and a preferred remedy to our problems. The people that lead our governments, or we call them leaders, are very unenlightened when it comes to problem solving, and that they believe violence is a way to solve problems. Now, I'm not going to argue about those special circumstances where somebody is physically attacking you or your life is in danger. I'm talking about as your general course of living your life. So many people walk around with opinions about how people should and shouldn't behave, how people should and shouldn't think. And when they don't do what they're supposed to, how do they need to be dealt with? I rarely hear anybody say they need to be dealt with compassion or patience, or they need to be simply given a chance to be listened to. Instead, it's typically that person should be beaten, that person should be cuffed and slammed to the floor. You hear our president talking about that. Body slam somebody that you don't agree with. Or, hey, I wish somebody would punch that person in the face. Really? That's the best we can do as human beings, is to look at those who disagree with us or those who aren't following the script of my self-appointed righteousness in being able to tell other people how they should live their lives. And if you don't do it the way I say, you deserve to be punished. That level of violence is getting us nowhere, and it all starts here. When you think about what you're trying to accomplish each day of your life, you're trying to live within the body you have that may have a disability or a chronic illness. You're trying to raise a child with special needs. You're trying to grow a business, and yet when things aren't going your way, you deal with it with some kind of violent thinking. Sometimes you wish that you could just spank the heck out of your kid because you're so angry that they're not learning after the 1,000th time. Yeah, Becky, you say that's just projection of anger towards anger. It says it's like trying to cure war with war as opposed to advocating nonviolence, which is what my life has been largely about is nonviolence, meaning you do not solve problems with the wishing or the delivery of harm in order to solve that problem. And one thing I want to encourage you to do is to go through your day today and kind of keep an eye on how often violence rises up in your mind. How often you maybe give yourself a face palm and say, man, that was stupid. you're hitting yourself. That's a violent wishing of harm upon yourself. And yeah, I'm kind of painting violence with a broad brush here. Maybe giving yourself a facepalm isn't the same as hitting a spouse or spanking a child, but it all has the same root. It's rooted in that desire or the belief that harm is a remedy or harm is deserved. What if you were far more compassionate toward yourself, much more forgiving, embracing the fact that you are a human being that is imperfect? You're going to stumble. The people around you are going to stumble. They're still trying to figure this life thing out, and some of them make bigger mistakes than others. But does that necessarily mean that you should be swift in your declaration of the wishing of harm to people? That just sets such an unfortunate precedent in your thinking and in your heart. And don't get me wrong, people have really screwed me over in my life. And there are people that I once wished tremendous harm upon because of the level of betrayal I felt. But over time, as I gained some distance from what they did, less and less did I wish them harm and more did I wish them peace, because I realized their actions were driven much more by their own suffering, their own imperfections, than by their desire to be harmful towards me or anybody else. But that requires some perspective, some maturity, some self-discipline, some ability to be conscious, to be mindful as opposed to being reactive. So that takes some work to accomplish. And, I've been at this for 30-some years. And one thing I'm happy to say is that the people who work with me learn how to approach things in that way, so that when they are met with obstacles or people that are doing wrong unto them, their first response isn't, how do I get revenge upon this person? Their response is, how do I have perspective? How do I learn to understand them through compassion? But that's a different conversation. I at least wanted to share this little tidbit with you, give you some food for thought, something really, really critical to reflect upon. Because one way to find peace within yourself, to find a better sense of mental, emotional, spiritual balance, is to let go of those patterns of violence in your mind. So I hope this was helpful for you. Think of 3 or 4 people that could really benefit from this message, and please share it with them. And if you've benefited from this, let me know. And until next time, this has been Brian. Thanks for being you.